the world that do not arrive gently. They do not wait to be understood. They do not ask for permission. They simply begin. Long before the first shift in the wind, before the ground remembered what it once held, before names like Alpha, Luna, or even Balance carried meaning,
there was only a quiet line.
Not written, not spoken, but woven into everything that existed. A line that did not separate light from dark, but held the space where both could exist without destroying each other. And for a long time, that line remained unseen, not because it was hidden, but because nothing had yet forced it to be found. Until now, because something had begun to change. Not slowly, not naturally, but deliberately. A force that did not seek balance, did not understand it, did not allow it, had started to reach across the world. And where it touched, things did not grow. They did not adapt. They stopped. The forests quieted. The ground stilled. Even the air seemed to hesitate, as if waiting for something that no longer knew how to arrive. And somewhere, deep beneath what could be seen, something ancient stirred, not awakened, remembering, because the line had never disappeared. It had only been waiting, for the moment it would be needed again, for the moment when someone, somewhere, would be forced to stand where everything begins to break, and decide whether the world would hold, or be rewritten into something it was never meant to become. That moment does not begin with power. It does not begin with understanding. It begins the way all things do, quietly, with a step taken in the dark, a choice not yet understood, a pull that cannot be ignored, and a call that, once heard, can never be undone. This is where the line begins again. You've heard the beginning, but the truth is still ahead. Subscribe now and listen all the way through, because everything changes before the end. In a world where wolf packs are bound by ancient contracts and bloodline alliances, a young woman long believed powerless is summoned to become the ceremonial mate to an alpha she does not trust, only to discover that her silence has been the most dangerous power of all. A modern world layered with hidden wolf societies, governed by a ruling council known as the High Circle. Packs are political entities as much as families, bound by treaties, territory, and lineage. There is one quiet rule no one questions. True Lunas are rare, and when they appear, they reshape power. Elara Voss. Raised in obscurity, Elara has spent her life moving between territories under the guise of protection. She is observant, restrained, and carries a quiet instinct for patterns others miss. What she lacks in status, she makes up for in perception. Adrian Thorne, Alpha of the Nightfall Pack. Strategic, controlled, and burdened by leadership at a young age. He agrees to a political mating not out of desire, but necessity. He trusts very little, and no one completely.
Sitting Valley.
Advisor to the High Circle. Elegant, composed, and deeply invested in maintaining the current order. She sees Elara not as a girl, but as a variable. Kale Riven, commander of Nightfall's Guard. Loyal to Adrian, but quietly suspicious of the circumstances surrounding Elara's arrival. Power hidden in restraint. Trust earned slowly, not claimed. Identity beyond lineage. Political manipulation within supernatural hierarchies. The cost of silence, and the strength within it. Elara is called to Nightfall under an ancient clause, a dormant contract binding her unknown lineage to the Alpha's line. She arrives expecting to be dismissed. Chapter 1. The Summons. The letter arrived without a name.
No courier. No knock.
No sound of approach. It was simply there, resting against the inside of Elara Voss's door as though it had always belonged to the space. As though the room itself had decided she should find it. Elara stood still for a long moment before reaching for it. Instinct had kept her alive longer than certainty ever had, and instinct told her one thing clearly. This was not chance. The paper was heavier than it should have been, sealed with dark wax pressed into an unfamiliar crest, a circle split by a vertical line, flanked by 2 crescent marks. The symbol stirred something faint and distant in her memory, like a word she had once known but could no longer pronounce. She did not break the seal immediately. Instead, she turned the letter over once in her hands, studying it the way she studied everything, quietly, thoroughly, without drawing attention. There were no marks of travel, no folds that suggested distance. It had not been delivered. It had appeared. That alone was enough to unsettle her. Elara exhaled slowly and pressed her thumb into the wax. It cracked cleanly. Inside, the message was brief. Elara Voss, you are hereby summoned under the authority of the Nightfall Pact, Clause 17, Subsection 4. Report to Nightfall territory within 3 days.
No signature. No explanation.
Only a final line, written in a different hand, sharper, more deliberate. You have already delayed long enough. Elara read it twice, then a third time. Nightfall. The name settled uneasily in her chest. She had spent years avoiding places with names like that, places that meant structure, hierarchy, attention. Places where people asked questions she had no intention of answering. And yet, the moment she read it, something in her stilled. Not fear, recognition. That was what unsettled her most. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her coat. 3 days, it had said. Chapter 2. The Road That Remembered expanded. The road to Nightfall did not feel new. That was the first thing Elara noticed. Not unfamiliar, not quite.
It was subtler than that.
The kind of wrongness that didn't declare itself, but settled into the edges of things. Like walking into a room where everything had been moved slightly out of place. Not enough to see, but enough to feel. She adjusted the strap of her bag across her shoulder and kept walking. The forest thickened as the path narrowed, trees rising taller the deeper she moved into it. Their branches stretched overhead, weaving together until the sky became fractured, visible only in narrow, uneven strips of pale gray light. Sound shifted here.
Not gone. Changed.
The wind no longer moved freely. It threaded through the trees instead, softer, quieter, as though it had learned not to disturb what lived beneath the canopy. Elara noticed everything. The uneven rhythm of her steps against damp earth. The subtle difference between the scent of wet leaves and older soil. The absence of birds where there should have been birds. She didn't ask for directions. She didn't need them. That, more than anything, unsettled her. The path revealed itself too easily. It didn't wind randomly or fade into uncertainty the way forest trails often did. It guided. Subtle clearings opened just as she approached them. Branches bent where they should have obstructed her. Even the ground beneath her feet shifted, firmer where it should have been soft, level where it should have dipped, as if something ahead of her was deciding the way forward. Or, remembering it. Elara slowed. She stepped deliberately off the path. Just once. Her boot pressed into a patch of earth thick with roots and moss, uneven and resistant. The forest changed instantly, not physically, but in presence. The quiet deepened, not silence. Expectation. She stood there for a moment, her breathing steady, her gaze scanning the trees. Nothing moved. And yet, something waited. Not threatening, not hostile, corrective. Elara exhaled once and stepped back onto the path. The pressure lifted immediately. She continued walking. By the second day, she stopped pretending she was choosing her direction. She wasn't lost. She wasn't guessing. She was being led. The realization didn't frighten her. It sharpened her. If something was guiding her, then something was watching. And if something was watching, then it could be understood. Everything could be understood. Given enough time. The markings began near dusk. At first, she almost missed them. Thin etchings carved into the bark of older trees, partially obscured by moss and shadow. They weren't crude or recent. The lines were deliberate, curved, intersecting, layered with intention. Symbols. Not decorative.
Structured.
Elara slowed, her attention narrowing. She stepped closer to one of the trees, her fingers hovering just above the carved lines.
Familiar.
That was the unsettling part. Not because she recognized the symbol itself, because she recognized the feeling of it, as if she had once known what it meant, and forgotten. Her fingers brushed lightly against the bark. The moment her skin made contact, something shifted. Not the forest. Her. The sensation wasn't pain. It was memory fragmented, incomplete. Voices.
Low.
Measured. Not speaking to her. Speaking around her. A circle. Not drawn. Formed. Not with symbols. With presence. Elara inhaled sharply and pulled her hand back. The connection snapped. The forest returned to stillness. She stood there, her gaze fixed on the mark, her pulse steady despite the suddenness of it. "I've never been here," she said quietly. The words sounded wrong. Not untrue. Incomplete. She stepped back, looked again. The symbol hadn't changed. But the way she saw it had. It wasn't just carved. It was placed. Part of something larger.
A path.
Not just leading forward. Leading back. Night fell slowly. The kind of gradual dimming that made it difficult to tell when light had truly left. The forest didn't darken all at once. It deepened, layer by layer, until shadows became something more solid. Elara didn't stop walking. She had learned long ago that stopping in unfamiliar places only gave uncertainty time to grow. Movement kept things clear, defined. The path shifted again as she moved, narrowing then widening, the trees pulling back just slightly as if allowing space for something more deliberate. The air changed too. Cooler. Not colder. Grounded. She became aware of a new scent beneath the others.
Faint.
But distinct. Smoke. Not fresh. Not distant. Settled.
Lived in.
Elara slowed. Nightfall. She didn't know how she knew. But she did. The forest ahead didn't open. It parted. Not dramatically. Not in a way that demanded attention. But enough. Enough that she could see what lay beyond. A boundary.
Not marked by stone. Not yet.
But present. Defined in a way that didn't need explanation. Elara stopped just short of it. For the first time since she had entered the forest. She hesitated. Not out of fear. Out of recognition. Something in her understood this moment mattered. That crossing forward would not simply be movement. It would be entry into something structured, something aware, something that had been waiting longer than she had realized. Elara exhaled slowly, then stepped forward. And behind her, the forest did not close. It settled, as if it had completed its purpose. Chapter 3. The Alpha of Nightfall. The gates appeared without warning. One moment there was forest, the next there was iron. They rose from the ground in a clean, unbroken line. Tall, deliberate, etched with the same symbols she had seen along the path. Only here, they were sharper. Defined. Intentional. A boundary. Elara stopped several paces away. She did not step closer immediately. Instead, she studied the structure, her gaze tracing the markings, the subtle shifts in the metal where time had not quite taken hold. This was not old in the way ruins were old. This was maintained.
Watched. Claimed.
"You're late." The voice came from her right. Elara turned, her movement controlled, measured. He stood partially within the shadow of the trees, as though he had stepped out of them rather than approached. Tall, composed, his presence anchored in a way that required no announcement. Authority did not sit on him. It moved with him. Elara recognized it immediately.
Alpha.
She inclined her head, just enough to acknowledge, not enough to submit. "I wasn't aware I was expected at a specific hour." His gaze sharpened slightly. "Everyone summoned to Nightfall is expected." There was no edge in his tone. No raised voice. Just certainty. Elara held his gaze without challenge. "Then your expectations were unclear." For a moment, nothing shifted. Then, something subtle changed in the air between them. Interest. Not approval. Not yet. But something closer to attention. He stepped forward, the distance between them closing with quiet precision. "Adrian Thorne," he said. Not as an introduction. As a statement of fact. Elara Voss. His eyes flickered just once. Recognition?
No.
Something else. Something unsettled. "You came alone." "Yes." You weren't escorted.
No.
A pause. That shouldn't have been possible. Elara said nothing, because she had already realized the same thing. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but deliberate. Then Adrian's gaze shifted, briefly, toward the gates behind her. Come inside, he said. Not an invitation. Not quite an order. Something in between. Elara stepped forward. The moment she crossed the threshold, something changed. It was not visible, not audible, but it was undeniable. A pressure.
A shift.
As though the territory itself had taken notice. Elara did not react outwardly, but inside, something long dormant stirred. Behind her, the gates closed with a quiet, final sound.
Chapter 4, A Role Without Power. Nightfall did not greet her. It assessed her. Elara felt it in the way the air shifted as she walked beside Adrian through the inner grounds. Wolves moved at a distance, some in human form, others not, but none approached. Their attention lingered, quiet and sharp, brushing against her like a second wind. Not hostile. Not welcoming. Measuring. She kept her gaze forward. The pack house stood at the center of the territory, its structure built of dark stone and wood-worn smooth by time and use. It was not ornamental. It was functional, solid, deliberate, built to endure. Inside, the quiet deepened. The moment Elara crossed the threshold, conversation ceased. Not abruptly. Not all at once. But enough. Enough that she felt the absence of sound more than its presence. Adrian did not slow. Elara Voss, he said, his voice carrying just far enough, will be staying within nightfall under the authority of the pact. A murmur moved through the room. Not approval. Not rejection. Something closer to calculation. And her role, someone asked. The voice came from the far side of the room, male, older, edged with something that had long since learned to hide itself behind politeness. Adrian did not look toward the speaker. Is under consideration. Elara felt the shift immediately. Not in the room, but in the wolves within it. Disappointment. Relief. Suspicion. A position without definition was a position without power. Which meant she was safe. For now. Adrian turned slightly, his gaze flickering toward her, not questioning, not apologizing. Simply acknowledging the space she now occupied. You'll be given quarters, he said quietly. Elara inclined her head. Thank you. It was enough. For both of them.
Chapter 5. The First Shift. The room they gave her was not isolated. That told her more than anything else. It sat along the east wing of the pack house, connected, accessible, within reach of movement and sound. Not a guest space. Not a cell. A place where she could be observed. Elara set her bag down and moved to the window. The forest stretched beyond the clearing, darkening as dusk settled. Somewhere in the distance, a low sound carried through the trees.
A howl.
It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to be. It was a call. And it was answered. One by one, voices rose, not in chaos, but in pattern. Structured. Layered. Each sound fitting into the next until the forest itself seemed to breathe with it. Elara stood very still. She had heard wolves before, but not like this. Not organized. The sound reached her, not just through her ears, but deeper. A resonance that settled beneath her ribs, pulling at something she had never fully named. Her breath caught. Just slightly. And then pain.
Sharp. Sudden.
Elara gripped the edge of the window as it moved through her. Not overwhelming, not uncontrollable, but precise. Like something testing its limits. Her bones did not break. They shifted. Not outward. Inward. Her senses sharpened all at once. The grain of the wood beneath her fingers, the scent of pine and iron in the air, the distant movement of wolves beyond sight. Her pulse steadied. Not faster. Stronger. Elara closed her eyes. This was not a loss of control. It was the opposite. A moment later, The sensation receded, leaving her exactly where she stood. Human. Unchanged. And yet not. She opened her eyes slowly. Whatever that had been, it had not been random. A knock sounded at her door. Elara did not move immediately.
Come in.
The door opened just enough for Adrian to step inside. His gaze went first to her hands, still braced against the window, then to her face. You felt it. Not a question. Elara straightened. Yes. Silence stretched between them, measured, deliberate. That shouldn't have happened, he said. Elara met his gaze. And yet it did. Something in his expression shifted. Not alarm, recognition. Nightfall doesn't respond to outsiders, Adrian said quietly. Elara turned slightly, her gaze drifting back toward the forest. Then, I suppose I'm not one. Chapter 6. The Unfinished Bond. The clearing did not release them immediately. Even after Elara stepped back, even after the elders lowered their voices and the firelight steadied, the air held. Suspended. Adrian did not look away first. That struck her. Most would have, out of discomfort, out of uncertainty. But he held the moment, as if waiting for it to resolve on its own. It didn't. Kale shifted slightly at the edge of the circle, his hand resting near the hilt of the blade at his side, not in threat, but in readiness. For a bond to stall, one of the elders murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. I've never seen it. Then you haven't seen enough, the other replied quietly. Elara let their voices fade. What mattered was not their confusion. It was the feeling still lingering in her palm. Not warmth. Not connection. Awareness. As if something had reached for her, and then paused. Waiting. For what? She asked, almost under her breath. Adrian heard it. For something neither of us is given, he said. Elara met his gaze. And what is that? His answer came, without hesitation. Trust. The words settled between them, quiet and forced, and more honest than anything he had said so far. The elder stepped forward again, regaining composure. The ritual is inconclusive, he announced. The bond is neither accepted nor rejected. Until further clarity, the arrangement remains provisional. Provisional. Elara almost smiled. She had lived her entire life in that space. Nothing certain. Nothing fixed. Then we wait, Adrian said. No one argued, because no one knew what else to do. Chapter 7. Eyes That Follow. Nightfall felt different after the ritual. Not outwardly. The pack still moved as it had before, structured, disciplined, controlled. But beneath that order, something had shifted. Elara noticed it in the pauses. In the way conversations faltered when she entered a room. In the way wolves watched her, not openly, but not discreetly enough to go unnoticed. They were not just observing her now. They were reacting. She crossed the courtyard at dusk, her steps unhurried, her awareness sharp. Two wolves stood near the outer wall, speaking in low tones. Their voices dropped the moment she passed, their gazes flicking toward her before quickly shifting away. Not fear. Not quite. Something closer to uncertainty. Elara continued walking. Let them wonder. At the far end of the grounds, Kale stepped into her path. Not blocking, but not yielding. You should be escorted, he said. Elara tilted her head slightly. Should I? Yes. Why? His jaw tightened, just slightly. Because you're not understood. Elara considered that. Neither are you, she said. For a moment, something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps. Or recognition. Then it was gone. That's different. Is it? Kale studied her longer this time. You're changing things, he said finally. Elara did not deny it. Then perhaps they were meant to change. Kale's gaze hardened. Not in anger, but in resistance. Change has consequences. Elara held his gaze. So does staying the same. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Kale stepped aside. Be careful, he said. Elara walked past him without looking back. Chapter 8. The pack divides. The division did not announce itself. It revealed itself slowly, through small fractures that grew wider with each passing day. Some wolves began acknowledging Elara without hesitation, stepping aside, lowering their gaze, offering quiet respect that had not been instructed. Others did the opposite. They avoided her, ignored her presence entirely, as though refusing to recognize something made it less real. Adrian noticed.
Of course he did.
The pack is unsettled, Kale said during a private council meeting. They'll adjust, Adrian replied. They're not adjusting, Kale said. They're choosing. Silence followed. That was more dangerous. Adrian leaned back slightly, his expression controlled. And were they choosing? Kale did not hesitate. Whether to follow you or question what you've brought into Nightfall. The words landed cleanly. Adrian did not react immediately, but his gaze sharpened. This isn't about her, he said. Kale met his eyes. It never is. Until it is. Chapter 9. Memory Beneath Stone. The lower levels of the pack house were not meant for casual exploration. Elara knew that before she descended, which was precisely why she did. The passageways were older, stone walls worn smooth in places, untouched in others. The air carried a different weight here, less lived in, more remembered. She moved without hesitation, her hand trailing lightly along the wall. The pull was subtle, but undeniable. It led her to a sealed door, not locked.
Just closed.
Elara paused, then pushed it open. Inside, the room was small, circular. Its walls lined with shelves, most empty. Not cleared, removed. Only fragments remained, pieces of parchment, broken seals, faint impressions where something had once been. Elara stepped forward slowly. This wasn't neglect. It was deliberate. She reached for the nearest surface, and the moment her fingers touched the stone, the world shifted. Not visually. Internally. Voices, low, steady. A circle. Not these stones. Older ones. Stronger. Erase it, someone said. You can't erase blood, another replied. You can erase memory. The voices faded. Elara pulled her hand back sharply, her breath steady despite the suddenness of it. They tried, she murmured. Behind her, the door creaked. She turned. Adrian stood in the doorway. You shouldn't be here, he said. Elara met his gaze. Neither should this room. Chapter 10. The Circle Watches expanded. The chamber of the High Circle was built to outlast memory. Stone columns rose in perfect symmetry, carved not with decoration, but with record, lines and symbols marking decisions that had shaped generations.
No windows.
No sense of time passing. Only the central flame, steady and unnatural, casting light that revealed without warming. Saren Vale stood closest to it. She had always preferred that position. Not at the center, that belonged to power. Not at the edge, that belonged to those waiting for it. But just within reach of both. She has entered the lower archives, one of the council members said. The voice belonged to Elder Merrick, older than most present, and cautious in ways that came from witnessing consequences rather than fearing them. Saren did not turn. She was always going to, she replied. Another voice followed, sharper, impatient. Then she's progressing faster than anticipated. Saren allowed herself a small breath, measured.
No.
She's progressing exactly as anticipated. You're simply noticing it now. That silenced them, because it was true. Saren finally shifted her gaze toward the others. You're reacting to movement, she continued. I'm observing pattern. And what pattern is that? Merrick asked. Saren stepped slightly closer to the flame, its light catching the edge of her expression. She doesn't force anything, Saren said. She doesn't assert. She doesn't claim. That's weakness, another council member said. Saren's gaze flicked to him. Cool, precise. No, she said quietly. That's why she's dangerous. A pause settled over the chamber. Saren continued. The last of her line didn't lead through dominance. They led through alignment. Wolves didn't follow because they were commanded. They followed because they couldn't refuse to recognize what was true. The words lingered. And if she becomes aware of that? Merrick asked. Saren's expression did not change. She won't become aware, she said. She'll realize. And the difference? Saren turned fully now. Awareness can be ignored, she said. Realization cannot. The chamber stilled. And nightfall? Merrick pressed. Saren's gaze shifted, not to the council, but beyond them, as if seeing something already in motion. Nightfall will fracture, she said calmly, because Adrian Thorne was raised to lead through control. A faint pause. And she was not. Chapter 11. A controlled distance, expanded. Adrian Thorne had been trained to recognize instability long before he had been given authority. It was the first lesson his father had ever taught him. Control is not about strength. It's about preventing what you cannot contain. He had carried that lesson into everything. Into leadership, into decision-making, into silence, and now, into Elara. The terrace overlooked the full stretch of Nightfall's territory. From here, Adrian could see movement, patrol rotations, boundary shifts, the quiet, constant rhythm of a pack that depended on order to survive. He knew every pattern, every deviation, and Elara was one he could not map. You're avoiding something, she said.
Her voice was calm,
not accusatory. That made it worse. Adrian kept his gaze forward. I'm managing it. That was the word he chose deliberately. Managing implied control, implied awareness, implied distance. That's not the same thing. He almost responded immediately. Almost. Instead, he paused, just long enough to consider why her words unsettled him. No, he said finally. It's more effective. Because distance created clarity. It always had. When emotions complicated judgment, you stepped back. You created space. You removed influence. That was how leadership worked. That was how survival worked. You think distance will resolve it? Her voice was softer now. Not pressing. Observing. I think clarity will. And distance brings clarity. Adrian turned then. Not sharply. Not defensively. But because he needed to see her expression when she asked that. Sometimes it prevents mistakes, he said. What he didn't say was that mistakes had consequences. His father had made one once. He had trusted someone too quickly, given authority before it was earned. The result had nearly destroyed Nightfall. Adrian had been forced to correct it. At 17. He had learned then what it meant to carry a decision too heavy to reverse. He would not repeat it. Elara studied him, not as a challenge, as if she were reading something beneath the words. And sometimes, she said quietly, it creates them. Adrian held her gaze, because for the first time, he wasn't entirely sure she was wrong. Chapter 11. A controlled distance, expanded. Adrian Thorne had learned restraint before he had learned command. It had not been taught gently. Nightfall did not raise leaders through comfort. It shaped them through consequence, through decisions that carried weight long after the moment had passed. His first lesson had not been strategy. It had been failure. 17 years old, newly trusted, newly tested, and he had chosen wrong. Not recklessly, not foolishly, but too quickly. He had believed in someone before fully understanding them, given position before it had been earned. Trusted alignment without testing its foundation. The result had not been immediate. That was what made it dangerous. It had unfolded slowly, subtle fractures in patrol patterns, miscommunications that seemed accidental, decisions that placed the pack at risk in ways that were not obvious until they compounded. By the time Adrian saw it clearly, it had nearly cost lives. He had corrected it. Decisively. But correction did not erase consequence. It did not erase the memory of what hesitation looked like, or what misplaced trust could become. From that moment forward, Adrian had learned to create distance, not because he lacked instinct, because he refused to rely on it alone. The terrace overlooked the full reach of Nightfall's territory. From here, everything could be seen, not in detail, but in pattern. Movement along the outer boundaries, shifts in patrol rotation. The subtle rhythm of a pack that relied on structure to remain whole. Adrian stood at the edge, his hands resting lightly against the stone, his gaze fixed on the forest beyond. He could read this landscape the way others read words. Where wolves were, where they would be, where they should not be. It had always been enough. Until now. You're avoiding something. Elara's voice did not startle him. It rarely did. She moved quietly but not with concealment. Not with the careful awareness of someone trying not to be seen. She moved as though she understood space. As though she belonged within it. Adrian didn't turn immediately. I'm managing it. The words came easily.
Familiar. Precise.
They had served him well for years. Managing implied control. It implied awareness without vulnerability. It implied that whatever existed was already contained. That's not the same thing. Her tone remained even. Not confrontational. Observational. That made it harder to dismiss. Adrian exhaled slowly, his gaze still on the horizon. No, he said. It's more effective. He meant it. Distance allowed clarity. Clarity allowed control. And control prevented mistakes. He had built everything he was on that understanding. You think distance will resolve it? There was no accusation in her voice. Only recognition. Adrian turned then. Not sharply. Not defensively. But because something in the way she said it required acknowledgement. I think clarity will. Elara's gaze held his. And distance brings clarity. A simple question. But not a simple answer. Adrian studied her for a moment before responding. Sometimes it prevents mistakes. He could have said more. Could have explained. But explanation required exposure, and exposure required trust he had not yet chosen to give. What he didn't say was that mistakes didn't just affect him. They affected everyone. The pack. The structure. The balance he had spent years maintaining.
He would not compromise that.
Not for uncertainty. Not for something he did not yet understand. Elara didn't look away. And sometimes, she said quietly, it creates them. The words settled between them. Not challenging. Not dismissive. True. Adrian held her gaze longer than he intended, because for the first time, he recognized something in her approach that did not align with his own. She did not create distance. She did not retreat from uncertainty. She moved through it. Not blindly. Deliberately. As if uncertainty itself was something to be studied, not avoided. That was not how Nightfall operated. It was not how he had been taught to lead. And yet, it had not failed her. You don't hesitate, he said. It wasn't a question. Elara's expression didn't shift. I observe. That's not the same. No, she agreed. It isn't. Adrian tilted his head slightly. Then what is it? Elara stepped closer. Not enough to invade space, but enough to shift it. I don't act until I understand what I'm acting on, she said. A pause. But I don't create distance while I'm trying to understand it. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. That creates risk. Yes, she said. The agreement was immediate, uncomplicated. And distance doesn't? That was the question he had not allowed himself to consider. Because distance had always felt like safety. But safety was not always accuracy. The wind shifted across the terrace, carrying the faint scent of the forest below. Adrian turned his gaze outward again. But this time, his focus wasn't as fixed. You assume I haven't considered that, he said. Elara didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was quieter. No, she said. I think you have. A pause. I think you just chose differently. Adrian exhaled once. Because that was closer to the truth than he preferred. He had considered it. Once. A long time ago. And decided against it. For reasons that had made sense. For reasons that still did. But now, those reasons were no longer uncontested. Not because they were wrong. Because something else existed alongside them. Something he had not accounted for. Something he could not control. His gaze shifted slightly toward her. You're not easy to account for, he said. Elara's expression softened, not into amusement, but into something quieter. Neither are you. The words didn't challenge him. They aligned with him. And that was new. The silence that followed was different. Not uncertain. Not unresolved. just present. For the first time since her arrival, Adrian did not feel the need to end it, to step away, to create distance. He remained where he was, beside her. Not closer, not further, just
There.
and though nothing had been decided, nothing resolved, something had shifted. Not in the bond, not yet, but in him. Chapter 12. The border stirs, expanded. The eastern boundary had always been stable. That was what made the report wrong. Adrian stood over the map table, his hands braced against the wood, his gaze fixed on the marked territory lines. They crossed here, Cale said, pointing to a narrow stretch of forest along the ridge. Not deep enough to engage, just enough to be seen. Testing, Adrian said. Cale nodded, deliberate. The injured scout stood nearby, silent now, his earlier urgency replaced with a quiet discipline expected of Nightfall's wolves. They moved like they knew the terrain, the scout added. Not like outsiders. That shifted something. Adrian straightened slightly. Then they've been watching us, he said. For how long?
Cale asked.
Adrian didn't answer immediately, because that question had more than one meaning. How many saw them, he asked instead. 3, the scout replied. And none engaged?
No.
Adrian nodded once. Good. You did what you were supposed to. The scout inclined his head and stepped back. Once he was gone, the room settled into a different kind of silence. Someone's feeding them information, Cale said. Adrian didn't look at him, because he already knew. You're thinking it's internal, Cale continued. It is, Adrian said, because no one external could move that precisely without guidance. Cale crossed his arms. That means we have a breach. Yes. And we don't know where.
No.
A pause. Then, you brought her in, Cale said. It wasn't an accusation, but it wasn't neutral. Adrian finally turned. I followed a binding contract. And now the timing shifts the moment she arrives. Adrian's gaze hardened, not in anger, but in certainty. You think she caused this? I think she changed something, Cale said. That's not the same thing. Adrian stepped closer, his voice lowering slightly.
No, he said.
It isn't. Across the room, unnoticed by both of them, Elara stood just beyond the doorway, listening, not intruding, just present. She had heard enough. Not everything, but enough. The timing,
The shift.
the implication. She didn't step forward, didn't announce herself, because what mattered wasn't what they said when they knew she was there.
It was what they said when they didn't.
Elara turned quietly and walked away, her expression unchanged, but her thoughts sharpening. Because she understood something now that neither of them had fully said aloud. This wasn't just about territory. It was about pressure, and pressure was meant to reveal what would break. Chapter 13. The Arrival of Saren Vale. Saren Vale did not arrive like a guest. She arrived like inevitability. There was no advance notice given to the pack. Only to Adrian. Even that had come late, a message delivered not by courier, but by seal and authority. By the time word reached the inner grounds, she was already there. Elara saw her first from across the courtyard. Not because Saren announced herself,
Because the space around her shifted.
wolves moved differently in her presence. Subtle, controlled, but not unaffected. Conversations didn't stop. They adjusted, lowered, redirected, respect, but not warmth. Saren stood at the center of it, composed in dark leather and fitted armor that carried neither excess nor decoration. Her posture was precise, her gaze measured. And when her eyes found Elara, she smiled, not wide, not welcoming, acknowledging, as if she had been expecting this exact moment. Elara Voss, Saren said, stepping forward without hesitation. Her voice carried, clear, refined, controlled. You've arrived exactly as expected. Elara did not move toward her. Have I? Saren's smile deepened, just slightly. Yes. A pause stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but deliberate. Adrian stepped into it. Saren Vale, he said, his tone even. Your presence wasn't requested. Saren's gaze shifted to him, and for the first time, something sharpened in her expression. Nor was it required, she replied. Oversight rarely is. Kale appeared moments later, his position settling just slightly behind Adrian, not by accident. High Circle doesn't visit without purpose, Kale said. No, Saren agreed. We don't. Her gaze returned to Elara. And I prefer to observe variables directly. Elara met her gaze without reaction. I'm not a variable. Saren tilted her head. No, she said quietly. You're the result. Chapter 14. The Weight of Observation. Saren did not press. That was what unsettled Elara most. She didn't question directly, didn't demand, didn't assert authority in obvious ways. Instead, she moved through nightfall with quiet precision, observing, listening, adjusting her presence depending on the space she occupied. She spoke to the elders first, then the commanders. Only later, to Adrian. Elara noticed the pattern immediately. Saren was mapping influence. And she was doing it without resistance. By the second evening, Saren requested a walk. Not privately, not formally, simply direct. Elara, she said, appearing beside her in the outer gardens, walk with me. Elara didn't ask why. She didn't refuse. They moved along the stone path in silence for several moments, the faint sound of water from the distant fountain carrying through the air. You don't behave the way they expected, Saren said finally. Elara glanced at her. Who? Saren smiled faintly. Everyone. Elara let that settle. I don't know what they expected. Saren's gaze shifted slightly, studying her. Not surface, but depth. Yes, she said. You do. Elara didn't respond. Because she did. Submission. Compliance. Uncertainty. Weakness. Instead, she had given them none of it. You're careful, Saren continued. You observe more than you speak. You allow conclusions to form before you correct them. Elara stopped walking. Saren did the same. That sounds like observation, Elara said. It is, Saren replied. But it's also strategy. Elara held her gaze. I'm not strategizing. Saren's expression didn't change. No, she said softly. You're remembering how to. The words landed deeper than Elara expected. Not because she believed them, because part of her recognized them. Chapter 15. The Fracture Within. The breach revealed itself in absence. Not in what was found, but in what was missing. Kale stood in the command room, scanning the patrol records for the third time. It's not here, he said. Adrian leaned against the edge of the table, his expression controlled. What isn't? The gap, Kale said. The shift in rotation that allowed the eastern boundary to be exposed. Adrian stepped forward, his gaze narrowing over the map. Every patrol is accounted for. Yes, Kale said. That's the problem. Adrian looked up. Kale met his gaze. Nothing's out of place, he continued. Which means it was made to look that way. Silence settled. Careful. Measured. Someone adjusted the pattern, Adrian said. Without leaving a trace. Kale nodded once. Which means they knew exactly how to do it. Adrian exhaled slowly. Internal. Yes. A pause. Then, or someone who was. That possibility shifted the weight of the room. Because it meant something worse than betrayal. It meant planning. How many could do this? Adrian asked. Kale didn't answer immediately. Because the number mattered less than the truth behind it. Few, he said finally. Very few. Adrian's gaze darkened. Then we narrow it. Kale nodded. But something in his expression remained. Unresolved. You're thinking it, Adrian said. Kale hesitated. Then, she arrived, he said. And the pattern changed. Adrian's voice sharpened. That's not evidence. No, Kale said. But it's not coincidence either. The room stilled. Because neither of them could fully deny it. Across the threshold, unseen again, Elara stood, listening, not to the accusation, but to the doubt beneath it. And for the first time, it didn't unsettle her. It clarified something. Because if the pack was looking for disruption, then they would find it, whether she caused it or not. Chapter 16. The Second Binding. Saren did not suggest the second ritual. She arranged it. It would be unwise, one of the elders said, standing at the edge of the chamber, to repeat a binding that has already proven unstable. Saren did not raise her voice. That is precisely why it should be repeated, she replied. Her gaze shifted, not to the elder, to Adrian. Uncertainty breeds fracture, she continued. You've already begun to see that within your pack. She didn't need to elaborate. They all had. Then we stabilize it, Adrian said. Not agreement. Decision. Elara stood at the far side of the room, silent. Watching. Saren turned to her. This time, she said, you won't hold back. Elara's expression didn't change. I didn't the first time. Saren's smile was slight. Yes, she said. You did. The clearing felt different the second time. Sharper. Not because the stones had changed, because the intention had. More wolves stood at the edge now, not formally present, but close enough to witness. The absence of secrecy made the moment heavier. More real. Adrian stepped into the circle first. Elara followed. Saren remained just outside it. Observing. Always observing. Begin, she said. No elder spoke this time.
No invocación.
No structure to contain what would happen. That alone was enough to unsettle the balance. Adrian closed the distance. 2 steps. Elara matched him. 1 breath apart. Do you understand what this is? He asked quietly. Elara held his gaze. Yes. Then don't pull away. I didn't, she said. Then don't hesitate. That was the difference. The first time the bond had paused, because something had waited. This time, it would not be allowed to. Adrian reached for her, and Elara did not wait. She met his hand halfway. The moment their skin touched, the bond ignited. Not a spark, a surge. It tore through the space between them, fast and sharp, pulling something deeper into alignment before either of them could contain it. Elara felt it fully this time. Not awareness. Recognition. Not him. Not herself. Something between them. Something that had always been there. The ground beneath them shifted. The stones trembled. A low sound rippled through the wolves watching, instinctive, unbidden. Adrian's control slipped. Not entirely, but enough. His breath hitched once, sharp, involuntary. Elara. She didn't pull away. She stepped closer. And that broke the balance. The bond surged again, then stopped. Not gently, abruptly, like something had been cut. The force of it pushed them apart. Elara staggered back 1 step. Adrian caught himself, his hand tightening into a fist as the connection vanished. The clearing fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Because this was not uncertainty. This was interference. Saren stepped forward slowly, her gaze fixed not on them, but on the space where the bond had broken. Interesting, she murmured. Adrian's voice was low. That wasn't natural. No, Saren said. It wasn't. Her eyes shifted to Elara. And now we know. Elara met her gaze. For what? Saren's expression sharpened. That something is preventing completion. A pause. Which means something is afraid of it. Chapter 17. What was erased? Elara returned to the lower archives before dawn. Not guided this time. Intentional. The memory she had touched before was no longer distant. It was forming, and she needed to see what had been taken, not just feel it. The room was as she had left it. Empty, in all the ways that mattered. She moved directly to the central stone. Not the shelves. Not the walls. The foundation. Her fingers pressed against it again. This time, she didn't hesitate. The moment contact was made, the memory came faster. Clearer. A chamber, not this one. Larger. Older. Wolves gathered in a circle. Not tense. Not divided. Aligned. At the center, a woman. Not commanding. Not forcing. But every wolf present was listening. Not because they had to, because they could not do otherwise. Balance must be maintained, one voice said. Not through control, the woman replied. Through truth. The memory shifted. Voices rose. Disagreement.
Fear.
They will not accept this. They will not control this. A final voice. Saren's. Younger. Colder. Then it must be removed. The memory shattered. Elara pulled back sharply, her breath steady, but her mind no longer questioning. Not erased. Removed. Not forgotten.
Taken.
You found it. Adrian's voice came from behind her. Elara didn't turn immediately. Yes. What did you see? Now, she turned. And for the first time, she didn't soften the truth. They didn't erase my lineage, she said. They hid it. Adrian's expression didn't shift, but something behind it did. Why? Elara held his gaze. Because it changes how power works. Silence. Explain. Elara stepped back slightly from the stone. My line doesn't lead through dominance, she said. We don't command wolves. A pause. We make them unable to ignore what's true. Adrian's jaw tightened. That's not leadership. Elara's voice didn't rise.
No, she said.
It's something else. Chapter 18. The first move. The traitor didn't run. That was the first sign. They moved.
Subtly.
But not enough. Kale saw it in the patrol shifts, in the timing, in the confidence. They're not hiding anymore, he said. Adrian stood beside him, already knowing.
No.
Which means they think we won't see it in time. Adrian's expression hardened. They're wrong. The eastern boundary was too quiet. Elara felt it before she saw it. The forest held stillness differently now, not natural. Not passive. Waiting. They're here, she said quietly. Kale nodded once. I know. Adrian stepped forward. Positions. The wolves moved immediately, shifting not into chaos, but formation. This wasn't panic. This was preparation. And then, movement.
Fast.
Coordinated.
Not a test this time. Then attack.
Wolves emerged from the tree line, dark shapes cutting through the mist, their movement precise, targeted. And, among them, one of their own. Kale saw him first. Riven, he said sharply. The name landed heavy. Not an outsider. Not unknown. One of Nightfall's inner guard. The traitor didn't hesitate. He shifted. The transformation was immediate. Bones snapping, form collapsing and reforming into something larger, faster, more dangerous. Others followed. The clearing erupted. Adrian didn't wait. He shifted mid-stride, his form breaking into wolf with controlled force, his size larger than the others, his presence immediate and commanding. Kale followed. Then the rest. Elara did not. She stood at the edge of the chaos, watching, not frozen, not afraid.
Seeing.
The movement, the patterns, the intent. And then, she stepped forward. Stop.
She didn't shout.
She didn't force. But the word.
Cut through the space.
Not loudly.
Clearly.
One wolf faltered. Then another. The traitor didn't. He lunged. Straight for her. And that changed everything. Adrian saw it, felt it, and for the first time, reacted without calculation. He intercepted the attack mid-air, the impact violent, immediate, decisive. The fight broke open fully after that. Not contained. Not measured.
Va.
And through it, Elara didn't retreat. She stepped into it, not with force, but with presence. And wolves began to hesitate. Chapter 19. After the break. The forest did not quiet immediately. Even after the fighting stopped, the air held the echo of it, sharp, unsettled, unwilling to return to normal too quickly. Bodies lay scattered at the edge of the clearing. Some shifted back into human form. Others did not. Nightfall wolves moved through the aftermath with disciplined efficiency, checking the injured, securing the perimeter, ensuring nothing followed the retreating attackers. Adrian shifted back first. The change was controlled, but not clean, his breath heavier than usual, his movements just slightly delayed as he regained full command of his body. He didn't look at anyone else. He looked for her. Elara stood exactly where she had been, not untouched by the moment, but unchanged by it. That, more than anything, drew him forward. "You should have moved," he said when he reached her. His voice was low, controlled, but not distant. Elara met his gaze. "They weren't coming for me." Adrian's expression hardened. "They were." "No," she said quietly. "They were reacting." A pause. To what? Elara didn't answer immediately, because now she understood.
"To the shift," she said.
Not the attack. Adrian studied her, not dismissing, not agreeing, reconsidering. Behind them, Cale approached, his expression sharper than usual. "We secured one," he said. Adrian didn't look away from Elara.
"Alive."
"Yes." That shifted everything. "Where?" "Lower chamber." Adrian nodded once. "Good." Now he turned. And this time, he didn't hesitate. "Stay close," he said to Elara. It wasn't a command, and it wasn't distance. It was the first time he chose not to create space. Chapter 20. The Truth That Holds. The prisoner did not resist. That was the second sign. He sat bound in the lower chamber, blood along his shoulder, his breathing steady despite the restraints. His gaze lifted as Adrian entered, then shifted.
Past him. To Elara.
Recognition. Not surprise. Not fear. Something closer to certainty. Cale noticed it immediately. "You know her," he said. The prisoner's mouth curved slightly. "Not personally. That's not what I asked." The prisoner didn't look at Cale again. His focus remained on Elara.
"They told us what to expect," he said.
Elara stepped forward.
"Who?"
The prisoner didn't hesitate. "The circle." The word landed harder than expected. Adrian's voice lowered. "You were sent." "Yes." "To test the boundary?" "To confirm it," the prisoner corrected. A pause. Adrian stepped closer. "Confirm what?" The prisoner's gaze flickered. Again, to Elara. "That she's here." Silence filled the space. Not confusion. Recognition. "They knew," Cale said quietly. "Yes," the prisoner replied. "They've always known." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then why wait?" The prisoner smiled faintly. "Because now it matters." Elara's voice cut through. "Why?" The prisoner looked at her directly. "Because you're not dormant anymore." The word struck deeper than it should have. Dormant. Not hidden. Not lost. Waiting. "For what?" she asked. The prisoner leaned back slightly despite the restraints. "For you to stop resisting what you are." Cale stepped forward sharply. "That's enough." "No," Adrian said. His voice was quiet, but absolute. He looked at Elara. Let him finish. The shift was subtle, but it was there. Trust, not complete, but no longer withheld. The prisoner exhaled once. "You think this is about territory," he said. "It's not." "Then what is it about?" Adrian asked. The answer came without hesitation. "Control." A pause. "Not yours." The chamber stilled, because now the lines were clearer and far more dangerous. Chapter 21. The Shift in Trust. Adrian did not dismiss her this time. He didn't send her away, didn't create distance under the guise of strategy. Instead, he walked beside her. The corridor above the lower chamber was quiet, the weight of what they had learned settling into the space between them. "You knew before tonight," he said. "Not a question." Elara didn't deny it. "I suspected that your presence here would trigger this." "Yes." Adrian stopped walking. She did too. "And you stayed." Elara met his gaze. "Yes." "Why?" It wasn't accusation. It was something else. Understanding.
Or the attempt at it.
Elara considered the answer carefully. "Because leaving wouldn't have stopped it," she said. "And staying." A pause. "Gives me a chance to understand it." Adrian held her gaze longer this time, not searching for deception, looking for alignment. "And if understanding it changes everything?" Elara didn't hesitate. It already has. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, but decisive. Because Adrian could see it now. She wasn't reacting to what was happening. She was part of it. Not as a disruption. As something central. "You're not the risk," he said quietly. Elara didn't respond. Because she knew what came next. "You're what they're trying to control." Silence followed. But it wasn't uncertain. It was clear. Kale stepped into the corridor then, his presence sharper than before. "They're regrouping," he said. Scouts confirm movement beyond the ridge. Adrian didn't look away from Elara. "Then we prepare." Kale hesitated. Just slightly. "And her?" The question wasn't simple anymore. It wasn't suspicion. It was positioning. Adrian answered without delay. "She stays." Kale's expression shifted. Not disagreement. Adjustment. "Understood." He turned and left. Adrian looked back at Elara. "For now," he said, quieter. "We stop reacting." Elara tilted her head slightly. "And start." Adrian's gaze sharpened. "Choosing." Chapter 22. What Saren wanted. Saren did not come to Elara in secrecy. That would have implied shame. Instead, she waited in the west courtyard beneath the broken archway, where old ivy clung to stone like memory refusing to die. The sun had long since set, and the castle lanterns cast low gold across the ground, but Saren stood in shadow as though she preferred to be seen only in pieces. Elara had known she was there before she turned the corner. Not because of sound. Because the air changed around Saren. It always did. Not heavier. More deliberate. As if even stillness arranged itself to accommodate her. "You've been expecting me," Saren said. Elara stopped several paces away. "No," she replied. "I've been expecting a move." A faint smile touched Saren's mouth. "And yet here I am." Elara did not return the expression. "Yes." For a moment, neither spoke. Nightfall moved beyond them. Quiet patrol rotations, distant footsteps, the wind moving across the upper towers. But here, in the courtyard's shadowed edge, the silence felt separate from the rest of the pack.
Contained.
Saren studied her. Not with curiosity. With assessment. "You're beginning to understand," she said. Elara's gaze did not shift. "I'm beginning to understand what was taken." Saren tipped her head slightly. "And what do you think was taken?" The question should have sounded rhetorical. It didn't. Elara answered evenly. "Choice," she said. "Memory. Truth." Saren's expression did not harden. If anything, it grew more still. "Truth is not the same thing as utility," she said. "There are truths that destroy structure merely by being known." Elara stepped closer by half a pace. Then the structure was already weak. That landed. Not visibly, but enough. Saren turned her gaze toward the forest beyond the inner wall. "When I was younger," she said, "I believed balance came from correction. That systems failed because no one was willing to do what was necessary to preserve them." Elara said nothing. Saren rarely spoke this way. Not to explain. Not to justify. So, Elara listened. "I watched wolves destroy themselves over instinct," Saren continued. "Pack leaders mistaking desire for wisdom. Loyalty for truth. Power for rightness. Every generation believed they were different. None of them were." She looked back at Elara. "Then I saw what your line could do." A pause. "Not command," Saren said. "Not rule. Something worse." Elara's voice remained quiet. "Recognition." "Yes," Saren said. The word emerged almost bitterly. Recognition without permission. Truth without negotiation. Wolves turning not because they were compelled, but because they could no longer hide from what they already knew. Elara felt the shape of that settle inside her. Not new. Named. "And that frightened you," she said. Saren's gaze sharpened.
No.
It made the future impossible to govern. Elara took another step forward. "So you erased it." Saren's expression remained composed, but her voice lowered. "I contained it. You buried it. I preserved what could still survive." Elara shook her head once. "No," she said. "You preserved what you could still control." That was the first crack.
Small.
But real. Saren's face didn't change, but something colder entered her voice. You think this is about me, she said. It isn't. It's about what happens when wolves are allowed to believe truth matters more than structure. Elara held her gaze. What happens? Saren stepped closer too. Now they stood near enough that the space between them felt intentional. They choose wrongly, Saren said. Repeatedly. They fracture. They worship feeling. They abandon order. And then they call the ruin freedom. Elara's answer came without force. Or, she said, they finally choose for themselves. The words fell cleanly.
No anger.
No raised voice. Just refusal. Saren stared at her for a long moment. Then the faintest trace of disappointment crossed her face. Not because Elara had surprised her. Because she had confirmed something. You will make him weaker, Saren said. Elara didn't ask who. She already knew. No, she replied. I'll make him choose without fear. Saren's gaze cooled into something final. Then you have already begun. She stepped back, gathering the dark of the courtyard around her like a cloak. When the next break comes, she said, remember this conversation. Elara did not move. What break? Saren's expression became unreadable. The one he cannot control. Then she turned and walked away. Elara remained where she was long after Saren disappeared into the corridor beyond the arch. Not because she was shaken. Because for the first time, Saren had spoken plainly enough to reveal what mattered most. This was never about whether Elara belonged at nightfall. It was about whether anyone, especially Adrian, could survive loving something he could not command. Chapter 23. When the bond turned. It began like pressure behind the ribs. Elara was halfway across the upper gallery when the bond tightened sharply enough to stop her in place. Not pain. Not exactly. Something more intimate than pain. Disruption. Her hand went to the stone wall beside her as the sensation surged again. Stronger this time. Brighter, as though something unseen had caught hold of the connection between her and Adrian and pulled. She closed her eyes. Breathed once.
Twice.
But the bond did not settle. It twisted. A door opened behind her. Elara. Adrian. His voice reached her a heartbeat before he did. She turned toward him and immediately saw the answer reflected in his expression. He felt it too. Not all of it, but enough. What is this? He asked, already moving toward her. I don't know yet. That wasn't fully true. She knew it wasn't natural. And she knew it wasn't coming from within either of them. Adrian stopped close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the tension in the air around him, the fierce restraint he carried like a second skin. The bond surged again. This time it hit both of them visibly. Adrian's hand went to the edge of the archway behind her, his jaw tightening. Someone is pulling at it, Elara said quietly. His gaze locked onto hers. Can they do that? They can interfere, she said. If they understand enough. His voice lowered. Saren. Elara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Another wave broke through the bond. Sharper. Less controlled. Adrian stepped forward instinctively. Elara. She shook her head once. Don't mistake proximity for stability. Then tell me what helps. The question struck her. Not because of what he said. Because of how quickly he said it. No distance.
No calculation.
No reflex toward control. Only urgency. Only her. That alone almost steadied the bond. Almost. She pressed her palm flat to the stone, grounding herself. She wants it unstable, Elara said. If the bond keeps breaking, then every doubt she planted survives. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. And if it doesn't? Elara looked up at him. Then she loses the last argument she has. Silence stretched between them. Another pulse of interference moved through the connection, but this time Adrian didn't tense against it. He watched her. Really watched her. Not for signs of weakness. For signs of truth. What do you need from me? He asked. The question landed deeper than he knew. Elara let out a slow breath. Stop bracing against it. His expression flickered, subtle, but real. You think I am? Yes. He looked away for the first time, not out of avoidance, but because the answer found him too quickly. He had braced against it from the beginning, not because he wanted distance from her, because he had mistaken caution for protection.
For both of them.
He had tried to contain the bond the same way he contained every dangerous thing, by understanding it before letting it touch him fully. But the bond was not a threat to be assessed. It was a truth to be permitted. The realization came hard and clean. Not all at once, but enough. He looked back at her. What if I don't know how? Elara's expression softened, not with pity, but with recognition. Then start by not fighting what's already there. Another surge moved through them. This one didn't break. It held, shaking.
Right.
Unstable, but holding. Adrian stepped closer. Not as command, not as instinct alone.
Choice.
He reached for her hand, then stopped just before touching her. A question in the pause. Elara turned her palm toward his. Yes, she said. The moment their hands met, the bond flared. But differently now. Still strained. Still under pressure. But no longer splintering in the same way. Adrian felt it immediately. The disruption had not come from the bond itself. It had come from the way he met it. From resistance. From interrupted trust. The realization moved through him with startling clarity. The bond had never required certainty. Only honesty. His eyes lifted to hers. And for the first time since it began, he understood that what he feared was not the bond's force, but the fact that it revealed him before he was ready to be known. The connection steadied. Not completed, but realigned. Outside, somewhere below the gallery, a howl rose through the night. Then another. The pack was feeling it. Elara closed her eyes briefly as the bond settled into a quieter rhythm.
She knows, she said.
Adrian didn't let go. Good. She opened her eyes. His expression had changed. Not softened. Clarified. Let her see what happens when it doesn't break, he said. And in that moment, Elara understood that something essential had shifted inside him. Not toward possession. Toward trust. Chapter 24. What the Wolves Chose. They attacked before sunrise. Not because darkness favored them, because exhaustion did. Nightfall had not fully slept. Patrols had doubled. The lower chambers remained guarded. Rumor moved faster than command. The pack had been holding tension for too long, and whoever planned the second strike knew exactly when strain became weakness. The eastern horn sounded once. Then twice. Adrian was already moving before the second call ended. Cale met him in the lower hall, sword in hand, eyes already sharp with battle readiness. Southridge breach, Cale said. Larger numbers this time. Adrian nodded once. Elara? Cale's jaw tightened slightly. She's already outside. That should have alarmed him. It didn't. That too was new. By the time Adrian reached the inner grounds, wolves were shifting across the courtyard perimeter. Some nightfall, some already breaking into motion toward the tree line where the mist had begun to tear with movement. Elara stood near the front of it all. Not sheltered. Not surrounded. Present in a way that altered the shape of the field before a single blow was struck. Adrian felt it then, not just through instinct but through the bond. The entire pack was keyed to the same edge.
Fear.
Loyalty. Tension. Uncertainty. And beneath it, expectation. Not of him. Of what would happen when she acted. That should have unsettled him. Instead, it clarified something Saren had never understood. The wolves were not waiting to be commanded. They were waiting to recognize what they already knew. The tree line broke. Enemy wolves poured through the mist in coordinated lines, some already shifted, others changing as they ran. Bones cracking, muscles reforming, human intent giving way to animal violence sharpened by instruction. Adrian shifted mid-stride. The transformation tore through him fast and clean, his body surrendering to something older and more exact than thought. He landed in wolf form at the front of the nightfall line, massive and dark against the gray pre-dawn. Cale shifted beside him. Then the others. The ground erupted. Wolves collided in snarling force, bodies striking, twisting, crashing into stone and root and one another. Teeth flashed. Blood hit the damp earth. The sound was not chaos. It was structured violence, the kind shaped by instinct and defended by territory. And through it, Elara moved forward. Still human. Still unarmed. Hold. She did not shout. She did not need to. The word moved through the field like a line drawn across water. 3 wolves faltered immediately. Not nightfall wolves. The attacking line. One skidded sideways, shaking his head as though surfacing from something. Another slowed mid-lunge, confusion breaking through the aggression in his eyes before a nightfall wolf drove him back. A third stopped entirely and turned, not toward Elara, but toward the wolf beside him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Adrian saw it even through battle haze. Elara was not controlling them. She was interrupting the lie they had entered with. The field shifted. Not cleanly, not all at once, but enough. Wolves who had arrived in formation began to lose it. Their precision broke. Their certainty thinned. A few kept fighting. Some retreated. Some hesitated just long enough to be overtaken by instinct that was suddenly no longer aligned. Kale, blood along one shoulder, tore through one of the attackers and shifted back just long enough to shout, "They're breaking." Adrian knew. He felt it. Not from the field. From her. Elara stepped deeper into the conflict, and the bond between them flared. Not painfully, not violently, but with a strange and rising steadiness. She was no longer reacting to her ability. She was using it. A wolf broke through the left flank, larger than the others, scarred across the muzzle, moving with one purpose only, toward Elara. Adrian felt the trajectory before he saw it. He turned and launched. The impact was brutal. They hit the ground in a snarl of claws and muscle and breath, rolling hard across the stone before Adrian drove the other wolf into the base of a low wall. The attacker lunged again. Adrian met him head-on, jaws closing at the side of his throat with controlled force. Not enough to kill immediately. Enough to end the fight. When he released him, the wolf collapsed. Silence spread outward in broken pockets. One by one, the remaining attackers withdrew into the trees. Or stopped fighting altogether. Nightfall held. But the field no longer looked the same. Not because they had won. Because the wolves who remained standing were looking at Elara differently. No longer as uncertainty. No longer as disruption. As answer. Adrian shifted back into human form, breath hard, blood on his forearms, his chest still rising with the force of battle. He turned toward Elara. She stood where the conflict had thinned around her, the mist curling at her feet, the pack watching in stunned and dawning recognition. Their eyes met, and Adrian understood, with a clarity that left no room for retreat, that Saren's true fear had never been that Elara would destroy structure. It was that she would reveal which parts of it had always been false. Chapter 25. The Name Beneath the Name. No one spoke for several seconds after the battle ended. The silence wasn't relief. It was reckoning. Nightfall wolves moved only when needed now, lifting the wounded, securing the perimeter, gathering the dead. But even those motions carried a difference. Attention kept returning to Elara, not with anxiety this time, but with something older than respect. Recognition. Kale was the first to put it into words. He stood near the broken courtyard edge, blood drying at his temple, his breathing steadier now. His gaze moved from the retreating tree line back to Elara.
"They responded to her," he said.
No one corrected him. Adrian looked at Elara across the churned stone and torn earth. The pack's fear had changed shape around her. It had thinned into something more difficult to dismiss. They didn't obey. Kale continued, quieter now, more to himself than to the others. They saw. Elara turned toward him. "What does that mean to you?" she asked. Kale met her gaze directly. It was the first time he had done so without suspicion shaping the space between them. "It means what we were told to fear was incomplete," he said. A pause. Or false. Adrian stepped closer. Not to interrupt. To stand within it. "You're not an alpha," he said to Elara. Not accusation. not denial. A naming of boundaries that no longer fit. Elara held his gaze. No, she said. The word came easily now, not defensive, but certain. I'm not. Kale frowned slightly. Then what are you? Elara did not answer immediately, because that answer had been hidden from her as much as from anyone else. But now the shape of it was clearer than it had ever been. My line didn't lead through dominance, she said. We weren't meant to replace alphas. She glanced toward Adrian before looking back at the pack. We were meant to make false leadership impossible to hide behind. That settled over the courtyard like a second silence. An older wolf near the northern steps lowered his head, not in submission, but in thought. Another exchanged a look with one of the healers. The pattern moved outward. Not dramatic, not unified, but real. They were reordering what they understood. And this time no one told them how. Adrian felt the bond stir, not in tension, but in recognition of the shift moving through the pack. Elara felt it too. He knew she did by the way her shoulders straightened slightly, not out of pride, but burden. This was no longer only about surviving discovery. It was about surviving what came after. What do they call it? Kale asked finally. Elara's brow furrowed faintly. What? Kale nodded toward the lower archives beyond the interior hall. Your line. This power. It had a name once.
It did.
Elara knew that suddenly. Not from memory exactly, but from the shape of something remembered through absence. Her answer came softly, silent. Kale's expression shifted. That's all. No, Elara said. She looked toward Adrian now, then back to the pack. Silent Luna. The title moved through the space with unexpected weight. Not because it sounded grand, because it sounded true. No one argued. Chapters 1 through 25. What began as a pull, a feeling neither of them could name, has become something neither of them can ignore. The bond is no longer a question. It is no longer something forming. It is real. But what they found in each other was never meant to exist alone. Because the moment the bond took hold, the world began to respond. Not with peace. Not with resolution. With attention. The fight they survived was not the end of something. It was the beginning of something far larger. Something older. Something that had been waiting. They did not stop what was coming. They revealed themselves to it. And now, the line between what they are and what they are becoming is beginning to disappear. Because this was never just about finding a mate. It was about awakening something the world has not seen in generations. And somewhere, beyond what they can feel, beyond what they can understand, something has already begun to move in response. Final line of this arc. The bond holds. The world listens. And the story has only just begun. Continue to chapters 26 to 50. If you thought this was the story,
stay with it.
Because what comes next will change everything you think you understand. Continue into chapters 26 through 50, where the bond deepens, the world begins to answer, and the truth of what they are becomes impossible to ignore. Subscribe now and follow the full journey. Because every chapter reveals more than the last, and the ending is something you won't see coming.